At 12:15 a.m. on April 15, 1912, the world's most famous distress signal crackled across the frigid expanse of the North Atlantic. Two desperate words, tapping out into the void from the deck of the RMS Titanic. CQD, then SOS. The ship was dying. Yet, despite carrying one of the most advanced wireless systems ever built, despite the frantic, unending transmissions from operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, a stark, terrifying truth emerged. The world was listening, but not all of it heard, and even fewer were prepared to answer. The problem wasn't just the iceberg. It was the entire tangled, chaotic web of early 20th century communication itself. What exactly went wrong in those frantic hours? How did a ship equipped with cutting-edge technology find itself screaming into an empty night? And more importantly, how did a single disaster expose the fundamental flaws in a system meant to connect humanity, ultimately forcing a global revolution in safety that still guides every vessel on Earth? The story begins decades earlier, in 1844, when Samuel Morse tapped out the first long-distance telegraph message. What hath God wrought? Instant communication was born, binding continents with copper wire, but the oceans remained vast, silent voids. Then, in the late 1890s, an Italian inventor named Guglielmo Marconi changed everything. He harnessed invisible waves, developing practical wireless telegraphy. By 1901, he had bridged the Atlantic with a signal, proving that messages could leap across the waves, freeing ships from their isolation. Suddenly, every major ocean liner wanted a Marconi room. Not for emergencies, at least not primarily. These were luxury vessels, floating palaces carrying the elite. Passengers demanded connection, the ability to send personal telegrams, to conduct business, to boast of their journey from the middle of the ocean. So Marconi's operators, like Jack Phillips and Harold Bride on the Titanic, were not White Star Line crew. They were employees of the Marconi Company, their primary duty to process a flood of commercial messages, a revenue stream for a burgeoning global network. Wireless was the amenity, a convenience, with emergency use considered secondary, almost an afterthought. By 1906, the International Radio Telegraph Convention had standardized call signs and improved some procedures. But one critical oversight remained. Continuous radio watch was not mandatory. When night fell, many wireless operators simply went off duty, shutting down their equipment, plunging their ships back into silence. The sea, for all its new connectivity, was still a lonely place. On April 14, 1912, the Titanic, then the largest ship ever built, sailed through the North Atlantic. Below deck, Jack Phillips, the senior wireless operator, was buried in a backlog. An earlier equipment failure meant he was hours behind on passenger messages. Iceberg warnings had been trickling in all day. Some made it to the bridge. Others were delayed, or simply not prioritized. The airwaves were crowded, a cacophony of crackling signals, often interrupted by powerful transmissions. From nearby shore stations and ships, many unaware they were drowning out crucial information. The system was fragmented, operators speaking over each other, a tower of Babel on the high seas. At 11:40 p.m., a jarring lurch tore through the ship. The impossible had happened. The Titanic had struck an iceberg. Water poured in. The engines screamed to a halt. In the wireless room, Phillips and Bride began to tap out the first frantic pleas for help. CQD, then the newer SOS. They were sending the distress call of a lifetime, hoping someone, anyone, was listening. The nearest confirmed ship to respond was the RMS Carpathia, some 58 nautical miles away. Captain Arthur Rostron immediately turned his vessel, pushing her engines to their absolute limit. But even at top speed, it would take hours. Hours the Titanic didn't have. Closer, perhaps much closer, was the SS Californian. Its wireless operator Cyril Evans had picked up an earlier garbled ice warning from the Titanic, which Phillips had cut short, focused on his commercial traffic. Evans, tired after a long day, then simply turned off his equipment and went to bed, a common practice in an era when continuous radio watch wasn't required. The Californian was essentially deaf. Later, crew members on the Californian's bridge saw rockets ascending from the horizon, but they misidentified them as company signals or celebratory fireworks. The captain, mistaking the Titanic for a smaller tramp steamer, didn't awaken Evans. The communication system wasn't just fragmented. It was blind, deaf, and misinterpreted. Every missed signal, every unanswered call, every commercial message prioritized over a warning, sealed the fate of over 1,500 souls. What transpired in those few agonizing hours revealed a shocking truth. the technology that promised salvation, also exposed its own fatal flaws. The Marconi wireless system was revolutionary, a marvel of its age, yet it was operated by a private company with commercial interests that directly conflicted with universal safety. Operators, though heroic in their final moments, were effectively revenue generators first, emergency responders second. Their employer's business model dictated their priorities, not maritime safety. The very system designed to save lives was ironically at times obstructing the very information it was meant to transmit. The human element, the corporate structure, and the lack of universal regulation had turned a technological triumph into a deadly liability. As the Carpathia raced through the night, the Titanic's calls grew weaker, more desperate. Phillips and Bride continued to tap, even as the ship listed, the power flickering, the icy water rising around their feet. They sent a final garbled message before the lights winked out forever. At 2:20 a.m., the unsinkable ship plunged beneath the waves, taking with it more than 2,500 lives. When the Carpathia finally arrived at dawn, all Captain Rostron found was a debris field and a handful of lifeboats crammed with some 705 shivering survivors. The silence that followed was deafening. The world woke up to the news not through instant communication, but through delayed, fragmented reports. The sheer scale of the tragedy, compounded by the harrowing details of missed warnings and unanswered calls, ignited a firestorm of public outrage and an immediate, furious demand for answers. In the immediate aftermath, two major inquiries launched, one by the U.S. Senate, chaired by William Alden Smith, and another by the British Wreck Commissioner, led by Lord Mersey. Both investigations painstakingly pieced together the chaotic final hours, focusing heavily on the failures of communication. They found the lack of continuous radio watches unforgivable, the prioritizing of commercial messages tragic, and the uncoordinated nature of the entire maritime wireless system unacceptable. The evidence was irrefutable. The world had stopped listening not because it couldn't, but because the system wasn't designed to guarantee it would. The consequences were swift and profound. In 1912, the U.S. enacted the Radio Act, demanding licensed operators and reducing interference. In 1913, the International Ice Patrol was established, a service still operated by the U.S. Coast Guard today, monitoring the very waters where the Titanic sank. Then, in 1914, came the landmark International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS. This monumental treaty, still the bedrock of maritime safety, mandated continuous wireless watch on all passenger ships, standardized distress procedures, required sufficient lifeboats for everyone on board, and introduced regular emergency drills and safety inspections. The Titanic disaster wasn't just a shipwreck. It was the catalyst for the systematic overhaul of global maritime communication, transforming a fragmented commercial network into a unified lifeline. Today, every ship on the high seas operates under the shadow of the Titanic. From the continuous radio monitoring and standardized distress frequencies, like GMDSS, to the International Ice Patrol and the enduring SOLAS Convention, the systems that protect millions of lives daily were forged in the crucible of that single catastrophic night. The story of the Titanic is not just a tale of hubris or an iceberg. It's a stark reminder that even the most advanced technology is only as good as the human systems and regulations that govern it. It exposed the danger of unchecked commercialism in critical safety infrastructure and proved that true innovation isn't just about building something new, but about building it right, with universal access, clear protocols, and an unwavering commitment to the common good. The world learned a brutal lesson in listening, and that lesson continues to echo across the oceans, ensuring that no ship ever screams into the void unheard again. If you've ever wondered how the hidden systems of our world came to be, and how a single moment can reshape global policy, consider subscribing. We dive deep into the untold stories behind the infrastructure that defines our modern lives. What other forgotten disaster do you think sparked such profound change?